all members on the tour were still together. While we're at the Total Garage, more stories were obviously being told. After which we headed out towards George, past Mossel Bay, to book into the King George Hotel for the first overnight stop. First thing the very next morning, the team congregated in the George Rex bar inside the King George Hotel, where plans were discussed and finalized in detail for the rest of the day, as later we would meet up with our Italian guests at the George Airport, who flew in with a chartered airline. The Time Warp Tour was now in full swing as our guests were assigned their automobiles through a lucky draw and then whisked off to the Fan Court Golf Estate, where they freshened up and had some snacks. After chilling out at Fan Court for a while, it was off through wilderness to the Knysna Heads. At the Knysna Heads, most of the drivers congregated in the East Head Cafe for lunch. Just inside the entrance of the cafe was this huge black and white photograph taken decades before of 3 classic automobiles. These same models were represented on the 2015 Time Warp Tour. How's that? After a fabulous lunch at the Knysna Heads, it was back towards George, stopping first at the famous dolphin viewpoint at the top of the Caimans River Pass, after which it was through the Outeniqua Mountains towards Oudtshoorn. Coming through the mountains inland away from the coastal areas, the tour headed into the southern regions of the Great Karoo, where the first stop was to introduce our Italian friends to the local ostrich farming heritage. Stopping at the world-renowned safari farm, the tour was given an informative brief of the local agriculture and history. After having tea and snacks, the tour headed towards the second overnight stop in the town of Oudtshoorn. The next morning, it was a late morning pickup at the Queen's Hotel. The morning brief was a very slick affair held outside on the pavement of the Queen's Hotel, with Cafe Brulee advertising a fresh breakfast with 2 free beers, which was very tempting, but the convoy saddled up before temptation became too great and headed into Route 62 proper towards the town of Ladysmith, where the first scheduled stop of the day took place. After Ladysmith, the rally headed towards Barrydale, stopping at the world-famous pit stop called Ronnie's Sex Shop, where the film crew producing the Beer County series for DSTV was happily interrupted for the short while that the Time Warp Tour 2015 were present at this very quaint middle of nowhere place. Ronnie's Sex Shop might be one of the world's most famous roadside stops. Under the great South African sky, this little siding has a most impressive list of visitors from all over the world. Looking at the walls within, it is a bit mind-boggling to see the number of visitors. The question being, was it Ronnie or the sex that played a role? Or has this place just got a touch of magic? Waving goodbye to Ronnie's, the tour headed into Barrydale for lunch, and here the driving team pulled into the Diesel and Cream restaurant and venue, which with its magnificent collection and display of all types of auto paraphernalia and memorabilia, with the addition of the entire Time Warp Tour 2015 classic auto fleet, this place became even more alive as we added to an already interesting venue. Diesel and Cream, with its old-time petrol pumps and signages, pop art figurines, mixed with iconic pictures from past decades, the venue is a real roadside eye candy place, and the food is just as scrumptious. The place has definitely been put together for people who have a love for the open road. Berrydale in general is famous for numerous restaurants and artsy escapism, which is conceived by citizens who love the country small town living, which with its slow pace lends itself to providing creative time, which has made the town a must-stop for people travelling through. After Berrydale, it was off to the town of Montague for our third overnight stop. The historical town is aligned with numerous very famous South African classical brands such as KWV and central to the district's agricultural business. The driving team enjoyed an overnight rest at the famous Mimosa Inn, while their Italian counterparts spent their time at the Montague Country Hotel, which is very famous for its Art Deco styling. Montague lent itself to a very memorable party and a great overnight stop. The following morning, the tour got underway as the convoy headed through the stress-folded mountainous rocky terrain for which the area is very well known for. Slipping through the carved cuttings, the rally headed off to visit one of the district's unique wine farms. Welcome to Excelsior. The residents of Excelsior were quickly distracted from their daily routine as the string of classic automobiles glided down the country lane into Excelsior. The unexpected action caused such a lot of excitement for the local llamas that one decided it was a good time, the perfect time to give birth. So, for the Time Warp Tour 2015, arriving at Excelsior became an even greater welcoming. Excelsior Wine Estate was a perfect stop for the driver team to get together for a team photograph while our Italian friends got down to some serious cheese and wine tasting. So, while the driving team stood around looking cool and having their photographs taken, enjoying the view, our Italian friends were introduced to some old-style winemaking. Besides the beautiful vistas that Excelsior Farm has to offer, visitors can also get a hands and feet on winemaking course. They get to pick the grapes, tramp the grapes, and so on. A lot of fun. After our impromptu winemaking course at the Excelsior Wine Farm, the Time Warp Tour moved down the old Route 62, making its next scheduled stop at the very famous Pumpkin Farm roadside stall, situated just west of Robertson. Once again, our Italian friends had lots of fun. Snacks and drinks were served and enjoyed by all. After the Pumpkin Farm, the tour rallied out southwards through the Hottentots Holland Mountains to the banks of the Theewater Kloof Dam, where lunch was to be had at the Aphrodisiac Smokehouse and Deli, which can be found just outside Verliesdorp. After a very flavour-filled lunch held at the Aphrodisiac Smokehouse and Deli, the Time Warp Tour then headed over the scenic Franschhoek Pass into the Franschhoek Valley and made its way to the very formidable and extensive automobile collection held at the Rupert's Lamarance Franschhoek Car Museum, one of Africa's greatest collections. Here at the Franschhoek Motor Museum is a car collection of world renown, which is a great place for any visitor, but even more so for car enthusiasts. This is one of Africa's unique collections. La Amarance does not only serve up a fine collection of automobiles, here too are some fine wines which our Italian guests got to enjoy in a private tasting before heading out towards their fourth overnight stop, which would be at the Grand Rocher Hotel on the foothills of the Paul Rock. The Time Warp Tour 2050 would spend the next couple of days traveling within the Cape's Golden Triangle, so to speak, marked here on the map in red. This would include Paarl, the Grand Rocher Hotel, Stellenbosch and its center town square called the Braak, and the Cape Town Atlantic seaboard. There would also be stopovers at one of South Africa's oldest established wine farms called Boschendal for picnics and of course wine tasting. Coming to the end of the first half of the 2015 Time Warp Tour, there was a final stop at the foothills of Lions Head overlooking Camps Bay, after which our visiting Italian guests were dropped off at the 12 Apostles Hotel. Even though the Time Warp Tour ended for some, it would continue forward for a new set of overseas visitors also arriving from Italy, who arrived the night before in Cape Town by a privately chartered jet plane. This time the tour would retrace its steps in the anti-clockwise direction and do it all over again, with a few extra stops included, with the driving team having spent 2 nights at their home base checking their motor vehicles. It was back out of Cape Town, down the N1 National Highway, to show our new set of visiting friends, South Africa's Route 62. Sticking to the known route, the first stop of course was the Boschendal Wine Farm. After travelling through Stellenbosch, Oberhalswater, Boschendal served up fantastic snacks and of course wine tasting. Leaving Boschendal, it was off to that awesome motor museum in Franschhoek, the Franschhoek Motor Museum, and then the guests were dropped off at their first overnight stop at the very grand Rocher Hotel in Paarl. The reverse anti-clockwise leg of the 2015 Time Warp Tour would have a few extra stops on the itinerary, such as the Victor Verster prison where Nelson Mandela was released from prison. The tour would eventually find its way out of Cape proper by travelling out through the Franschhoek Valley over the Franschhoek Pass, but only after our guests were taken on a short walkabout through the historic French Huguenot town of Franschhoek. Even though there were a few extra stops, the Time Warp Tour made sure we stopped at all the familiar haunts along the way, where our Italian guests were continuously blown away time and time again by the numerous culinary delights of all flavors and traditions that were served up at every stop along the way. All along the tour, the ever-present, cool, calm and collected Commander-in-Chief of the driver's team was Leonard Schneider, who made sure that nobody ever got left behind. Soon we were back in Montague for another overnight stop. The next morning, once again, we found ourselves frequenting Diesel and Cream, then through Berrydale with a stopover at the one and only Ronnie's Sex Shop. After Ronnie's, the tour headed down to the Algerais farm, where our guests were invited to a traditional boerewors lunch, while the drivers, they stuck to the traditional pie and coke. Heading back into the Oudtshoorn district, there was more than enough time to meander up towards the spectacular Kango Caves for a visit. Soon the tour would be coming to an end for our visitors with a last overnighter in George. The entire tour was, for all intents and purposes, a roaring success for our guests, who were finally dropped off at the George airport for their flight out. It is certain that guests and drivers on their final evening offerings at the King George Hotel and the Fan Court Golf Estate in George can look back over the cars that were on the tour, all of which performed extremely well, with, of course, the helping hand of a fantastic and experienced crew of mechanics. The question on everybody's lips surely is, how soon can the next Time Warp Tour be put on the clock? The Time Warp Tour 2015 was a most magnificent experience for all involved. It showed off the best the Western Cape of South Africa has to offer. From Cape Town to the Outeniqua, Georgetown to Oudtshoorn, via the all-time classic Route 62. The only thing left was the drive home for the driving team, and that, of course, is always the most enjoyable of all. Till next time, God bless. See you on the Route 62. And remember, if I don't see you on Route 62, remember the old saying, if I don't see you through the week, I'll see you through the window.